Number one, you have to lead with some curiosity.
Customer experience wisdom, a dash of travel talk. We've been cleared for takeoff.
The best meals are served outside and require a passport.
Welcome back, CX Passport travelers. Today, I am talking with Melissa Bardsley, a guest introduced to us by former CX Passport guest, Lisa Guzman. Melissa has spent her entire career in customer support across banking, manufacturing, and SaaS. That range gives her this strong perspective on how differently support organizations operate depending on the environment. From regulated process-driven organizations to SaaS teams that rely on troubleshooting and adaptability and agility. She leads post-sales functions like order management and frontline support where customers are directly interacting with the company and forming their impressions of the company in real time. Along the way, she's developed views on hiring, leadership development, and what it takes to build teams that deliver a consistent customer experience. Melissa, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
It is my pleasure indeed. I have always said the best guests are those that are introduced by alums of CX Passport, and you fit that category. Today is going to be awesome. I mentioned you working across all of those industries earlier. When you compare those environments, what really changes in how customer support operates, and how do you balance regulation with what the customer actually needs?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some similarities. The biggest differences lie in kind of two components. One is your customer expectations. So what does your customer expect from the experience? Do they need more hand-holding? Do they need more education? And I find that a little bit more in SaaS. Or are they just looking for a quick answer and a quick response? That can be a little bit more prevalent when you're talking about what I consider more transactional customer support. So you bought a pair of jeans and you just need to return them. And so it's a more transactional experience. So some of it, number one, sits in what are the customer expectations. The other piece is what do you deliver and how do you hire and train your team to deliver what's expected? Again, a transactional experience where you're following maybe a blueprint for how you deliver support looks much different than you don't know what you're going to get when you answer the phone and what that customer is going to need from you. You need to be able to think on the fly and pivot quickly to deliver what they need.
I want to come back to that hiring part of it because that's a really good point. That it's not just the structure; it's who you bring into that structure. Talk to me a little bit about the structure. So the people that you are bringing in come into these different environments. What do those environments need to look like to equip those people to be able to deliver that consistent customer experience that we talked about in the introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it depends on the maturity of your business model. So when you think of more transactional, and I always like to talk about like big retailers because I think people can relate to that.
Right.
Again, you purchase a pair of jeans online and they're not the right fit. You don't like the style. You need to return them. Again, there's kind of a blueprint for that. There's a playbook for that of what you can do. And when you call in, it's a pretty easy transaction of someone telling you in black and white, very easy terms, this is what you need to do next. And so it's a little bit easier from the support standpoint where you can get someone up and running pretty quickly. You can train them pretty quickly. They can easily follow the processes and procedures you have in place. When you talk about SaaS, especially in a startup environment, which so many of them are, you need to, number one, hire people that are really uncomfortable operating in the gray. You may not even have a playbook yet. You might not have processes established yet. And even if you do, it's virtually impossible to document or help people get trained on every single scenario that they're going to encounter. So they need to be curious and be willing to ask questions and know that every time they pick up the phone or read an email, it may be a situation they haven't encountered before. They need to be really uncomfortable, like comfortable with the uncomfortable, I guess I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, well, let's talk about it. So these are different. They can be the same person, but you're talking about different skill sets. If you're hiring and looking to identify those skill sets, how do you approach building a team when you're talking about this very tactical, process-driven approach, and the other is exactly as you're describing, the being comfortable with the uncomfortable?
Sure. Some of it is what they've done in their background. So obviously experience, if the only experience they have is very transactional, they may have a more difficult time kind of transitioning to a less clear role
Hmm.
or a more unknown position. I think you look for someone that feels comfortable with like a technical aptitude. So, are they someone that's curious about the technology that they use and willing to kind of dig in and get their hands dirty? I had a leader in the past who told me one of the questions they like to ask in interviews was, tell me something new that you've learned recently. And
Hmm.
it doesn't matter, can be in your professional life, can be in your personal life, but you learn a lot about people in terms of how did they learn it? Did they ask questions? What technology did they use to learn it? Are they willing to get their hands dirty? And do they talk a little bit about failure along the way, the
Hmm.
mistakes that they made in their learning and how they sort of accomplished that? Had a candidate one time who told me they built a chicken coop all on their own. And that was the thing, right? They had built a chicken coop and it
Right.
was all about, yeah, they had gone on YouTube and they had watched videos and they'd gotten their hands dirty, all these different things. And so you absolutely learn a lot about how someone learns, their learning agility,
Uh,
their process again for like successes and failures, how they try something out. And so it's a great way also to get someone talking about their process for that and how curious they are, how creative they are. You learn a lot.
yeah, I'm laughing about the chicken coop. I think I'm sitting here when you asked that question, my brain went to, okay, how would I answer that? And I feel like the answer almost 90% of the time, now being both a longtime homeowner
Mm,
and also the owner of a 2001 Chevy Silverado, my answer is going to be something. And I learned how to repair something in one of
yes.
those two categories that I didn't know how to do before, because I guarantee that something is breaking in one of those two. I think the last one was repairing a dishwasher heater core. All right, I learned how to do
Yes,
that. So
exactly.
I can talk about that, and I can certainly talk about the failures that were involved in that. You mentioned the failures part of it, and I think that's
Mm,
something that a lot of businesses are very uncomfortable in. Great that we can talk about the hiring of it, that we can talk about somebody coming in and what did you experience somewhere else.
sure.
But at the places you've been, how have you helped support employees when they have those falling short moments
Mhm.
and restore them to, well, not falling short? And then also, how do you discern, okay, this actually isn't meeting the mark and something needs to change?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? So I think the first part is, how do you build confidence when someone's made mistakes or had failures?
Hmm.
I was recently talking to a newer leader. They'd only been in their role about a year in a support function, and they had made two what they considered incorrect hiring decisions. Two
Hmm.
people who weren't a great fit, didn't work out. Both of them wound up leaving, and they were really paralyzed by fear. Like, I'm going to make the wrong decision
Hmm.
again. And I said, I think you learn a lot more sometimes in your hiring decisions by the ones that were incorrect than the ones that were correct. You remember the person who wasn't the good fit. And so
Hmm.
you sort of add to your bank of what does success look like in the role that you're looking to fill, and how do you hire a little bit more closely to someone who's a match for that. So I think that's one component of it, is
Hmm.
really talking about, okay, so you made a mistake and that feels painful, and it's a disruption to your team, and you've spent a lot of time, but what did you learn from it? how
Hmm.
how do you apply that to the next time you have an interview? The second piece is really about feedback, and I think it's so incredibly important. We all talk about it a lot, but it's really important to realize that the goal is never to walk into a difficult conversation and say, I can't wait to have this hard conversation today. Just, yeah, it's just not going to happen. And it's not how anybody views it. Nobody wakes up in the morning. But I think really when you understand that it's your job as a leader in whatever capacity to have those difficult conversations, and you understand the need for it, and that it's more important to walk through it than to avoid it, because timeliness matters so much.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so
Yeah.
you embrace the need to have it rather than saying, I'm going to be excited or really happy about it. It's still difficult to have those. I think the second piece of it is, someone recently said to me, you can say what you mean without being mean. And
Hmm.
it was so obvious, but also like really impactful to me, that you don't have to hurt someone's feelings by being direct and giving people the feedback they need to hear.
Oh yeah, and what was the book that was out? Oh, what is it? Maybe it's a decade now at this point. Radical Candor, and
Hmm.
there were a lot of folks that embraced that concept, but decided, no, I'm still going to be an a-hole, and that's radical candor, and
Right.
that's what the book is on. No, it's not. And so you're right. You can be
Absolutely.
direct, but still have kindness involved in that. Well, it's one of the things that I was excited to talk to you about is the fact that you've had all this variety of roles in that Uh, customer focus areas, order management, frontline support, these different areas.
Mhm.
What have you learned about keeping the customer experience consistent? Because we
Yeah.
talked about that in the intro
Mhm.
across all those different teams and functions.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to communication and conversation. Words matter. And so many companies, so many teams have those, mission statements or their core values. And so it'll be something like, we want to deliver a world class experience. We want to go above and beyond for our customers. Where they kind of get it wrong is that we don't tell our teams what we mean by that. So you may have a team of 20 people. If I interviewed them or did a quick poll and said, what does world class mean to you? What does above
Mm,
and beyond mean to you? I'd get 20 different answers. And so the key for me is to really go to the core of your business and understand what does that mean for you as an organization, and then how do you communicate that out to your group. That's where it all starts. That's the foundational piece. That
hmm
leads to how do you hire and who do you hire? How do you train people? What metrics do you put in place? What do you hold them accountable to? And it becomes your language that you weave into everything you do every single day. And you have your team speaking the same language. And so you become a team that reinforces the message all the time through all of your
hmm
activities.
I like that we're talking about that because so many times you've got companies that, okay, yeah, customers are at the center of everything we do. It's the
Mhm.
poster on the wall, it's the taglines. People will have a little badge that says it. And then the customer experience still sucks. And whatever definition that means, right? So you've talked about kind of how companies can do it right, how they can do it wrong, but
Yeah.
tactically, what does a
Yeah.
company need to do nuts and bolts to
Mhm.
get out of the poster and into reality?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I think, sometimes it starts at the top, but then it needs to again be woven through all the layers of your organization. So the trouble is that a lot of times your different teams are overseen by different leaders. And we want to allow people autonomy to be themselves. We don't want people becoming robots. AI has its place, but people have their place too. And
Amen.
I think we want to preserve that individuals bring their personalities and their style to the team. And there's value in diversity, of course.
Okay.
But you want to be speaking the common language. And so I think it starts again with how do you define what your culture, what your mission is, what those words like world class or above and beyond. And then I think it is the reinforcement. So it's talking about those things with a frequency. It's making sure that they're front and center. It's making sure that those are the behaviors you hold your team accountable. So we spoke,
Mhm.
I think, a little bit about metrics or touched on how they impact these teams. And you can have a lot of metrics for a team, especially if your team is anything like a call center. You can pick from 500 different metrics. If you choose to do that, you will probably have a team that's very, very confused if they have 100 metrics that they're held accountable to. But what you can do is use those definitions and how you want to deliver service as sort of your North Star.
Mhm.
And that becomes the guidepost that you are doing all of your work in that direction. And so then when you come up with goals or metrics from your team, when you pick your KPIs, you're able to pick things that align with that mission, that culture, those core words of what you want to deliver. So that becomes, that definition becomes your guidepost, again, your North Star, and everything else is reinforcement of that. It's the same
Mhm.
language, it's the same words, and not just being mindful of what KPIs or metrics move you in that direction, but what KPIs and metrics take you further away. Meaning, if you have that as a metric for your team, does it deliver the behaviors that you're really wanting to see and that you're encouraging? And sometimes it can do both things.
Oh, Melissa, I want to get back into metrics because I think there's a lot that gets sort of glossed over
Mm.
when we talk about metrics. And I think there's some things that we can pull out of some of the wisdom you've already shared. And I want to go a little deeper. But first, I want to take a little break here, a little change of pace. Join me here in the First Class Lounge. We'll move quickly here and hopefully have some fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Yeah, I think probably Paris is my top location. I'm a bit of a romantic and probably grew up dreaming of going to Paris. And I've been really lucky to be there a couple of different times now. My husband's company was headquartered just outside of Paris. And
Oh,
so
nice.
I did get to visit a couple of times. And I really just love everything about it. I love Europe in general, but the people watching, the food, the architecture, the flowers, just all of it, I think is really amazing.
Okay, let me ask you a very specific off-topic question here. Well, it's related to what you just said. This morning, I was listening to a podcast, Two Guys on a Plane, fun podcast. Everybody go listen to that if you're at all interested in the aviation industry. It's two flight attendants. They were talking about one of the tips that they had been told about travel in Paris was never eat at a place that had flowers out front. Is that something? Tell me more about that. I couldn't
I don't
ask
know.
them the question.
I haven't heard that one. And
Okay.
I'm a little bit cautious of like too many do's and don'ts. I think,
Yeah.
look for the popular suggestions, check things out, but I'm more pass by something that looks interesting and stop. Sometimes when we travel, especially those kinds of trips, we pack too much in and you don't have enough time to just sort of sit and be in whatever environment you're in. And I love to make sure I fit that time in as well.
We're just going to sit on that for a second. Everybody, when you travel, sit and be and absorb that culture. I'm guilty. I'm guilty, absolutely, and need that wisdom that you just shared there. What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Singapore is
Okay.
high up there. I would really love to get to Asia, but Singapore I think is really interesting. And I'm hoping, I think the next one up for me is south of France and northern Italy. So I'm hoping to do some of that. I think that will be next year.
Oh, great places indeed. What is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
I love pizza, especially pepperoni pizza. I could eat it all night and day, but I'm a bit of a foodie. And so I really like all different kinds of food. I'm much more adventurous as an adult than I ever was as a child. And so, yeah, I really enjoy all different kinds, especially if it's like a salty, sweet kind of combination. So Asian food, love all of that. Yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Very nice indeed. Well, you set me up well. What is something you were forced to eat growing up, but you hated as a kid?
Two things. My family has a story that my mom made all of us on one of five sit at a table and eat stewed tomatoes. And we weren't, it was one of those, like, you're not allowed to get up until you finish. And none of us like those. So that memory always comes to mind. But I would say probably the much more common that people like that I don't really care for any kind of lunch meat. And so, those going to a friend's house and I was like, nope, can't do that. Nope, even as an adult. So yeah.
Boy, that makes the elementary school lunches a little trickier, but I'm sure you navigated them.
I was like peanut butter and jelly every day.
Hey,
which was fine.
That's not so bad. Not so bad at all. Time for us to leave the First Class Lounge. What is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
I take hairbrushes and I have multiple. Some people take like multiple pairs of shoes. I like the blowout. And so I have multiple hairbrushes that go with me and take up a lot of room in my suitcase.
Oh, Melissa, you have no idea how much I love that answer. Not because, well, anybody can look at my hair and know that I don't need a hairbrush. So my hair is running away from me. It's the uniqueness of the answer. Yours is going to be somewhere around episode 250, 260. I don't think anybody said hairbrushes. I love it. I love what I get to learn about folks. Can we go back to the metric conversation? I may spend a little more time in the metric space than I actually anticipated. We've seen metrics used to help people grow, help people get better. We've also seen them used as weapons. How do you create a culture, an organization? How have you seen it work well that metrics are actually used to support the business and support the person without being used as this just weapon?
Interesting. And I love that question because I think it's really true. I think there's two ways you can use metrics. So I think number one, it's the guideposts or the numbers you hold your team accountable to every day
Hmm.
or every month, and we can talk about those. I think the second piece is how you use them in a coaching capacity. And so, really, like specific example of that is I'm not a particular lover of like average handle time. I think that under the
Amen.
yeah,
Hallelujah.
it's key,
Preach.
right? Under the wrong circumstances, it encourages sometimes your support team to cut calls short.
Hmm.
Meaning, if you're driving for an average talk time or average handle time of 5 minutes, your team becomes clock watchers. So they're at 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and now they're cutting your customer off. They don't really care if the situation's taken care of. They
Hmm.
just want to wrap up that call so that they can meet their metric and move on to the next guest. I understand why it's used. It just, in my mind, doesn't drive the behaviors, which the behavior for me is to have a customer that's satisfied, that gets what they need from the call or the interaction, and they don't need to call again necessarily. And so I use that more in a coaching capacity. What I mean by that is I still measure it in the background and I know what the average is for my team. So maybe the average for my team is the 5 minutes that I mentioned earlier. But when I'm in my one on one sessions with an employee who more bumps up to like 7.5 or 8 minutes, and I've
Hmm.
listened to their calls, I think, number one, context matters. And so are they running longer than average because they need more training? They're struggling with the information. Are they
Hmm.
maybe doing too much like chit chat? And so I think that you can use it as do I need to help them more or do I need to help them be more aware of this? And so I use it as a coaching opportunity
Hmm.
to look for the ways that I can improve and get that handle time down. But it's not a punishment for someone who's really doing their best, hopefully, to try to take care of the customer.
Yeah, there's gosh, I almost don't want to say this word, but I am. There's almost a laziness that can be introduced with metrics, and that is the number is what it is, and therefore I'm going to think
Mm,
of this person in a negative way or coach them out of the company or whatever that looks like. Whereas what you're describing is a concerted effort by a leader, a coach, to actually invest the time to understand what that number
absolutely.
means. And going beyond what the number means is that anti-laziness component that it sounds like you're describing is the best way to,
Mhm,
or a great
mhm.
way to handle this. Well, let's talk about that because because you've had the different roles throughout the path, you stepped into some situations that are great. You've also stepped into places where things weren't working the way they should.
Sure.
When you walk into that situation, what is that first thing that you're looking for to understand what's really going on?
Yeah. I think a good part is to always start with the data. But to your point, that only tells part of the story. And so I think you have to understand what the drivers are. You have to look at the context behind it to really understand why is it high. I'm a gut feeling person a bit of the time, but I think in the beginning, you really have to look at all of the different components. And to your point, I don't know if it's laziness. I think a lot of our leaders are truly overworked at
Yeah,
some level. And
that's
I would
kind.
also
You're right.
say, to be fair, and listen, maybe some of it is laziness, some of it is not necessarily knowing how to be a strong leader, like how to do the coaching component in that conversation. It also leads, and we talked about this earlier in our conversation, to some difficult conversations. And a lot of people try to avoid those.
Yeah.
And so they'll just look at the information and become a bit of a micromanager around that data point when they don't really understand what's needed to improve the circumstance. So I think again, it when you're new, it starts with data. I also think that people get confused and think you have to make big changes to see improvement. I really love
Ooh.
to go into a new job and look for the low hanging fruit.
Hmm.
You can be a superstar really quickly by identifying some of the things that are really obvious to you and just didn't stand out to the person that was in your
Yeah.
role before you. It's just a new set of eyes. That fresh set of eyes is incredibly powerful.
Okay, I definitely want to ask you about that because you're right. And it's so tempting to, I've got to make a big splash.
Uh-huh.
I have to acknowledge, though, I appreciate the way that you coached me there, that I needed to have a little more empathy and understanding. Look, it's not just laziness. Sometimes these people have way too much work on their plate. So they're
Okay.
actually not lazy, they're efficiency experts. And even I needed to be course corrected there. Thank you for our coaching session.
Mm,
I want to close out with what you said there about the small wins.
mm,
Sometimes those small wins or that low hanging fruit are
mm,
there because they're tradition, their culture, they're sacred to the way the company operates. When you're new, that can be a tricky thing to call out. How do you navigate? Look, this is broken. I know it's broken. It's very clearly that it's broken. And I know that this is something special, meaningful, important, and hard to change for that
mm.
company.
Mm-mm.
How do you navigate that tension?
Yeah. A lot of it, we've spent so much of our conversation today talking about communication, and I think that's the cornerstone of so much of this.
Hmm.
Number one, you have to lead with some curiosity. So you have to ask questions. You have to understand, why are they hanging on to something from the past? Are you able to change it? You might be able to, and you might just not be able to at this moment in time, as much as you may know that improvement could come from making a change. But I think the second point is really acknowledging that any change is hard. So it's important for you to acknowledge that with your teams as individuals, all people have different responses to change.
Hmm.
And then I think communicating, what does the future of this look like, and paint the picture, and what is their role in that future of the team, and what does it
Yeah.
look like moving forward, not just making change for the sake of change, but really to get to a place where it's better. But I think as excited as we can be, because we can see that future state so clearly, we need to acknowledge that getting from here to there can be a really scary process. And you've got to walk through each individual on your team at a pace that's comfortable for them.
Oh, for those that are watching the video, know that I just sprained my neck nodding so hard at what you just said there. It is that setting that placement for them in the future, the way you said that of,
Mhm.
and it helps alleviate that fear because so often, especially in companies with seeing employees as disposable, there's that fear of, yeah, this change means I won't have a job or I have no role, I have no responsibility, and setting that vision of, yeah, this is what's changing and here's your place in that future and what that looks like. Melissa, this has been enjoyable. I think folks may want to get to know a little bit more about you and your approach to the customer and business in general. What's the best way for folks to get to know more about you?
Yeah, the best way is probably to follow me on LinkedIn. I
All
am
right.
pretty active on there and love to talk a lot more about customer experience and leadership specifically.
Awesome. Well, that, as always, will be put there in the show notes. Yeah, Melissa, there was that running theme that you even called out that was through this of communication, and I appreciate that. And I think that's something that someone who has had the different type of industry exposure can really see, that that is a thread that is universal regardless of where you are and what the role is. This was an absolute treat for me today, Melissa. Thank you for being on CX Passport.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.